Now, the South African economy may have contracted by 0.2% in the third quarter, with declines in construction highlighted as a contributor. But the Afrimat Construction Index shows that the pains in the economy are not weighing as heavily on the sector. The index grew to 131.5 during the period from 120.3 previously. That's the highest level since 2016. This has 6 of the 9 measured indicators recorded positive real growth rates compared to the second quarter. Independent Analyst Roelof Botha joins us to unpack the findings of the index in greater detail. Roelof, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Good afternoon.
Hi there.
All right, Roelof, this is actually a great, I would say, especially if we are speaking about 2016 levels, because, that's pre the peak of, for instance, issues like load shedding. And I'm keen to get your thoughts on how you're contextualizing this number then in relation to all of that.
Yes, that's the really good news, is that the Afrimat Construction Index has more than recovered from the impact of COVID. But unfortunately, and everybody involved intimately with construction will know very well that you have wide-ranging differences in the indicators. Anybody out there that is involved in building houses will find this difficult to believe. This 9.2% increase in the Afrimat index quarter on quarter, because, and there's a very good reason for that, and that, of course, is the unduly restrictive monetary policy of the Reserve Bank. Your value of building plans passed in the third quarter was 25% lower than a year ago. But the value of wholesale sales of construction materials was 24% higher. So this is a huge difference. But the key indicator in this quarter was the employment. The employment growth was really nothing short of spectacular.
That actually correlates perfectly with what we would have seen from the quarterly labour force survey. We saw unemployment ticking down to 31.9%. But I'm keen to get your thoughts on what we saw happening with the GDP data, where we saw construction being a negative contributor to that print. In light of what we're seeing with this index right now, Roelof, how do we make sense of that?
Well, as far as the GDP is concerned, if you add just 3 items here, 3 factors: the highest interest rates in 15 years, the Durban Harbour, and thirdly, load shedding, and maybe a fourth one, the state of our roads outside of the Western Cape. Those 4 factors contrive to prevent the economy from growing in the third quarter. But there is certainly life in construction. I mean, you don't create 145,000 new jobs. That's the tally so far this year in construction. And then, that's ample proof that the industry as a whole is certainly on a growth path.
I also want to speak about production and demand for building materials. Do we know if that's coming from commercial projects or even from residential projects? Just also considering how super strained the South African household is at present.
Well, yes, there are still houses being built, although the value of buildings completed in this quarter declined again. And on a year-on-year basis, it's also down depressingly so. Once again, what the construction sector at large, and certainly the property sector in South Africa requires, the residential property sector, to lift its head up, is lower interest rates. That would be the key. But there's one indicator that stands out here, and that's the volume of building materials produced. Now, building materials essentially is sand, aggregate, etc. And that's up 9.8%. Let's call that 10% quarter on quarter, almost 3% year on year. So that is ample proof that somewhere construction activity in South Africa is actually happening. And I've been in the Northwestern Limpopo province recently, and you can see roads being being fixed from year to year. I drove on a tarred road in Tzaneen for the that was in Tabazimbi for the first time in a decade. So things are slowly but surely happening, but we need to step it up.
Let's also speak about, what we are anticipating to be driving what we see in terms of these jobs. The job issue is very important. 145,000 jobs really is spectacular generally, but more importantly in South Africa's economy. What kinds of jobs are these, Roelof? Do we know, and how sustainable these jobs are?
Well, I like to believe that they're sustainable because the infrastructure projects are taking off. Sanral is going to issue new tenders again. So we are pretty confident that next year will also be a bumper year for the Afrimat index. Well, we're hoping and praying that that will happen.
And then also just speaking to that outlook for 2024 there. Roelof, I'm just keen to get your thoughts on that specific issue and what we expect to be driving that positively. We know government has made commitments to infrastructure spend, but we haven't seen that quite materialize in the way in which we had hoped.
Well, the big item here remains renewable energy. Whether it's a wind farm, whether it's a large generator or a solar installation. I've seen solar installations now recently at Netcare hospitals in Cape Town. First they built the carports and then they slap the rest of the stuff in. That's a lot of construction activity going on there. And this is not going to stop. I mean, we've got no options in South Africa. We have to continue with this drive for renewable energy. And you also see that in record imports of machinery and equipment. So on the big picture is really very good for construction and building activity. But as I said earlier, lower interest rates are key to allowing this to flourish further.
Let's talk about that because we are only anticipating, I mean, if at all, the risk environment is still quite strained, I would say. We're talking about cuts there in the second half of 2024. I'm wondering, what we should see immediately change in this index should interest rates be cut, which are some of the indicators here, the sub-indicators where we'll see a positivity, Roelof.
Well, new capital formation has now recorded its 7th successive double-digit growth rate during the third quarter. But the key is, apart from interest rates, is privatization, or let's call it public-private partnerships, whatever they want to call it. But unless the private sector becomes much more involved in all aspects of infrastructure creation and maintenance and fixing the stuff that was virtually destroyed in some instances during the state capture era, we are not going to see a real takeoff.
Well, Roelof, all we can do is watch and hope that next year indeed does also lead to a better ACI. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It's always a pleasure. That was Independent Analyst Roelof Botha.